What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Landlord Chick podcast. So, today we're going to be talking about figuring out new markets. Specifically, we're going to be looking at what are some of the indicators that you can research and find for yourself if you have this hunch about a market, but maybe nobody's really talking about it, or just a few people are. There are some things that you can research that are going to give you an indication of where the population is going, where the general city is headed, what sort of direction it's going in. So that's what we're going to talk about today. This is a very small segment of what you should be doing when you are researching new markets. I want to make that clear. This isn't like the cure-all, just do this quick 15-minute thing and you'll pick your new market. No, that's not what I'm saying here at all. This is just one small piece of a much broader disclosure or due diligence that you should be doing when you are searching out brand new markets to invest in. Building a real estate portfolio is as much about buying properties as being a de facto entrepreneur. I'm Karina Ufinger. I'm a multi-property investor, rental management company CEO, and also a landlord coach. I'm going to show you the systems and knowledge you need to thrive as a real estate entrepreneur. From your first property purchase to building a portfolio of passive income where you work less than 5 hours a week, you'll learn the essential information and skills to build a profitable portfolio and live the life you truly want. Whether you are well on your journey or just starting out, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Landlord Chick podcast. So I'm not necessarily a person who considers themselves unorganized. In fact, I think I'm a balance of organized and unorganized. It just depends on what sector of my life you're looking at. For instance, when I'm planning an event or something big in general, I am super organized, like crazy level of organization with that. Here's a great example. The last time that we moved, instead of writing on the boxes and Sharpies and everything and having people trying to figure out, wait, what does that say? Or wait, where's the writing on this box? I actually went and got rolls of washi tape. Washi tape is like craft tape that comes off really easily. I gave each new room in the home a corresponding color or pattern of washi tape, and I labeled the boxes with that so that people weren't trying to read penmanship or read something. It was just quick visual. Okay, red here. Oh, look, red's on that door frame. This box goes in there. But yet, there's certain things in my life where I am not that level of organized. And that's the area where I've really been trying to spend more time the first part of this year getting organized. And it's really been the bane of my existence. It has. I have struggled with organization in certain areas for so long, and finally I've committed to it. I'm like, you know what? We're going to tackle it this year. So the first part of this year has been taken up by honing in on my processes, specifically when I choose to do something. Because it's very common for me to think, okay, I'm waiting in line to check out at Walgreens. Pull up my phone, pay a couple contractor invoices while I can quickly on my credit card. Boom, boom, boom. But yet I don't think I should really be doing that, because what inevitably happens is I pay that invoice really quickly, but I don't download the invoice. I don't upload it to the Google Drive where it's stored for tax records. It certainly doesn't make its way over into my bookkeeping software. So I'm not sure I've actually done myself any favor by spending those 3 minutes paying 5 invoices when I'm not completing the process all the way through, and I'm probably just making a bigger headache for myself down the road. So when I talk about honing in on my organization, that's one of the ways that I'm talking about getting serious about it this year. Is just making sure that when I choose to do something, I have enough time allotted for it in that time frame. So I'm doing all of the steps, not just step 1, but step 2, 3, 4, whatever's included. Not just trying to make the most out of every single minute and sort of partially do things. Because in the end, that's not really getting me anywhere. But anyway, that's neither here nor there for today's topic of this podcast. That was just a very random sort of informational piece about what's going on in my life. It just seemed like something I want to share with you. But anyway, so in today's episode, we're going to be talking about Google searches for new markets. As investors, usually at some point in our career, we're going to need to find new markets to invest in. Or maybe you need to find a market to begin with because you live in a state where it's rather expensive to invest. So you're automatically looking beyond your state's borders for opportunities. If you're a seasoned investor, it's possible and likely that at some point your current markets are going to be exhausted. And you're going to need to look for new places to purchase long-term buy and hold rentals. And I want to make it clear we're talking about long-term, meaning these are not short-term. These really aren't even necessarily medium-term, talking about nurses or traveling nurses, traveling doctors, or contractors that travel throughout the country and stay places for a couple of months, but not really long-term. We're talking about long-term residences, the traditional sort of buy and hold investment. Now, when we're all looking for new markets, usually we get our ideas from random places. And this is a true story, 100%. I coached an investor who was new, who wanted to invest in Scranton, Pennsylvania, simply because they were a fan of The Office. 100% true, you can't make this shit up. Totally 100% legit. So we sometimes make our decisions about where to invest or think about investing in very weird ways. But yet there's more conventional ways that we come across markets. Maybe we have a friend or relative that lives there. Maybe we heard some inklings about some talk under the radar in real estate groups, or maybe you saw an article that caught your eye or a news thing that caught your eye. Or, of course, a very common thing is for investors to go on vacation to that place and then decide, you know what, I want to own property here. So they do. So we're looking here now in this podcast episode, what Google searches could we be doing to help us get an indication of what an area is like? Not only what it's like currently, but what its projection is going to be. Now, two of the common things that investors look for on the internet, like right away when they've decided on a new market, is they try to go directly to the Department of Labor and get employment statistics. So the percentage of people gainfully employed in the city, what the median income is, things like that. Then the second thing they'll do is they'll try and find the latest census. And the census will offer population projections. Now, don't get me wrong, these are great resources, but I don't think they're really important ones. And here's the reason why. By the time that information is published on the website, it's probably already at least 8 months old, 8 to 10 months old, at least. When you think about what it took to gather all of that data, do all the math, have it pass through whatever bureaucracy it needed to pass through before being published on the internet, chances are it's pretty out of date. And it's going to be very out of date and really irrelevant in today's fast-changing world. Our world is so fast-paced, it changes so fast, that information like that took months to get organized and pass through bureaucracy is really kind of irrelevant, and it shouldn't be used as a determining factor in your decision. You're going to be relying more on recent information. And one of the best ways to get recent information is to do Google searches in the news field specifically for certain things. And we're going to talk about some of the things that I search for in Google when I'm looking at a new market. So for starters, let's talk about how we do these searches. So I talk about Google. So obviously go to google.com or whatever you want to use. I mean, is there anybody that uses anything other than Google? Because I think even Android Apple users use Google. So doesn't everyone use Google to search? But in the event, go wherever you go to do all of your searches. And the way each one of these searches is going to start, it's going to start with the name of your city. So let's say, for instance, you're going to look at Dearborn, Michigan. I don't know why. That's just what I thought of right now. For some reason, you are hot to trot on Dearborn, Michigan. So you're going to put into Google Dearborn, Michigan, and then one of these key phrases that we're going to discuss coming up next. And then you're going to be sure and click on the news tab. I want to make sure you click on the news tab because that's going to be sure that you are curating the most recent news that's come out in regards to that city and that specific key phrase. So our first key phrase that I want to talk about is called TIF. That is TIF as in Thomas Igloo Forever, TIF. And it stands for Tax Incentive Funding. Now, tax incentive funding are measures that are passed usually by a municipal government, sometimes by the county government, and in some cases the state. But we're focusing more on municipality, meaning the city, town, village, or even the county. But they pass this sort of funding to entice businesses to move operations to their city. They will tailor this TIF, sometimes to specific industries or types of development that they want. So perhaps a municipality really wants to bring in warehouse facility, warehouse companies. So they might create a TIF that specifically aims those that operate out of warehouses. Or maybe they want to really inject new business life into their main downtown. So in that instance, they might formulate a TIF that attracts accountants, lawyers, people that run a more traditional sort of office setting. And the way these are created is the city council or governing body will get together. They'll decide what kind of businesses they want to attract. Then they're going to figure out what sort of enticement would be fiscally good. What is going to make a business move their operations to our city? Is $5,000 enough? Is $6,000 enough? Do we need to go higher than that? And then they're also going to talk about the mechanics of how that tax incentive funding is actually propelled towards the recipient, which is beyond the scope of this podcast, so we're not going to get into it. But once the governing body decides on it, discusses it, votes on it, the next thing they're going to do is a couple things. First, they're going to release it to the general public. So it's going to go out as basically minutes in a meeting. It's also going to be released in a press statement. And then third, a lot of municipalities actually choose to have a list ready of businesses that they want to inform when they've managed to pass this tax incentive funding. Now, you might be wondering, okay, what does tax incentive funding have to do with real estate? If you haven't made that connection yet, let me explain. If a municipality is actively trying to improve itself and it's trying to bring in employers, it's bringing in employment, which means that area is going to have an increased diversification of employment. And of course, we all know people follow jobs. So if their company moves from 35 miles away to this city, chances are a fair amount of employees are going to follow them. They're going to be spending more time in that city. Even if they don't live there immediately for whatever reason, they're going to be spending more time in that city. They're going to get to know that city. They're going to be like, man, it wouldn't be so bad to live here, and I could really cut down on my commute. That's why paying attention to TIFs matters. So you want to do a Google search for your city, and then TIF, and again, make sure you're going to the news tab on Google. Second thing you can search for is school referendums. When a population is projected to be growing or is actively growing, one of the best and sort of first indicators of that is going to be school activity. Specifically, if they are expanding a current facility or building a brand new site, or even third, building a secondary school of the same type. Now, what I mean by that is if they already have one elementary school, but they realize, man, we got to have another one, they're building a second one. So I don't mean secondary as in like high school, but a second form of the same type of school that already exists. That is huge indications of not only population growth projections, but a specific type of population. They are anticipating families with kids moving into the area. They aren't planning on 65 plus moving into the area in droves. They're seeing families coming in, people with young kids moving into the area. That is why school referendums are a fantastic indicator of where the projections are going. Because here's the other thing about school referendums. Number one, I think almost everywhere, these have to be voter approved, which means that the voters have to see the need for this, which means this is sort of like boots on the ground confirmation that, yeah, you know what? We need another elementary school because this one is way too crowded, or we need a bigger high school because this one is just not doing it anymore. That's actually boots on the ground confirmation for people living there that they need more schooling opportunities. The other thing about this is that regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum of things, a school district committing to building or expanding a new facility is not something that's done lightly. It's something that they want to make sure is going to pay off by putting that money into it. Because expansion and a brand new site or a secondary site is much more expensive and much more costly than just updating a current building. Now, in some cases, obviously there's some cases where they're so dilapidated or they're just so small it doesn't make sense. But generally speaking, when you have a school district that is saying, yeah, we need to spend money on this, you can pretty much bet that they are seeing a strong reason for it. So school referendums are a great thing to search for. Now, there might not be anything going on currently, but you might find out that they built a brand new elementary school 3 years ago. Or maybe they're starting to talk about building a second middle school or junior high, depending on what terminology you use. You'll find out those things, and that's going to give you indication of where they're thinking specifically family life is going. If they're investing in these things, they're likely seeing a projection that there's going to be a large increase of family activity in that area, which again is going to be good for you as an investor. Now, of course, you don't want to necessarily take any of these articles at title factor, so be sure you're clicking on them, and if you can read them, I know there's a lot of places out there that require subscription nowadays, but hopefully you can at least read a little bit of the article that gives you an indication of what the purpose is of the headline. So are they building a brand new site? Are they trying to entice warehouse industry in? What are they trying to accomplish with it? Now, the third one, and this is the new one for me, and this is why I'm having this podcast episode sort of unplanned. It hasn't been in the calendar at all. Like, I literally just had this epiphany last night. So recently I've become involved in a charitable organization which helps identify what are called food deserts. So food deserts are places in the world, but specifically here in the United States, where people do not have access to a grocery store or fresh produce within 15 miles. You might think, now, hey, wait a minute, is this really a thing? And it is, especially when you get outside of the northeastern area of the United States, when you get into the northern part of the Midwest and even the southwest part of the Midwest. So we're talking like Oklahoma, Texas, even Kansas a little bit, get into Mexico. There are places that are considered food deserts because they don't have access to fresh grown produce from a local farmer's market or anything like that. And they have to drive a considerable distance to get to the grocery store. These are likely communities that are sort of what we would call one-horse towns, in the sense of there's a cluster of population, but there's really not much going on except for that cluster of population. Sure, they might have a convenience store and a gas station, and depending on what state you're in, they may or may not likely have a bar. I'm talking about Wisconsin. But that's usually like the biggest part of the core of this population cluster, because it's not even necessarily an incorporated entity. So it's not like we're talking about a specific city, village, or anything. It's an unincorporated cluster of population. And these people have to travel or make arrangements to get food, because it's not something they just drive 5 minutes down the road to Winn-Dixie, Piggly Wiggly, Price Busters, Price Choppers, whatever you have, Aldi's, and get food. They have to drive a considerable distance to get this type of food. These are people that are usually relying on otherwise the pub and then the convenience store to feed them, meaning that they're usually not getting the greatest nutrients in their food. So anyway, that's the charitable organization that I'm involved in. And one of the things that we recently discussed is how grocery stores can be a huge indicator of where that specific area is headed. Meaning, if you don't know this, grocery stores have a very small profit margin, like the smallest razor thin profit margin. Running a grocery store, you have to do a lot of sales to actually make a profit and keep your business open, because on most of your items, your profit is so incredibly small that you can't just sell one thing and get a profit, which is going to pay for one employee's wages. Profit margins on grocery stores are so incredibly small that it's really, really tough to run a ma and pa one that succeeds. Now, so we know that grocery stores have a very small profit margin, which means that when you're looking at a specific city, if a grocery store in the area closes, if the only grocery store in the area closes, that is an indication that the population is on a downward trajectory and income is on a downward trajectory. Why is that? Well, one of the first places that we start to try and tighten our belt when we need to is our grocery expenses. If we're doing that as consumers, then this store that already has a razor thin margin with each product it sells, if we're buying less, it's making less, which means it's harder for it to keep its doors open. So you can see how possibly learning that a grocery store recently closed in a community might be an indicator to you that it's not necessarily a positive projection for that community. Now, there are exceptions to this rule, and I want to make that clear. If you have a city where you have multiple grocery stores and one closes, that's not necessarily an indicator of a downward projection of anything. That could simply be they couldn't keep up with the competition. Maybe there became too many choices recently and they just didn't make the cut. More specifically, the idea of a grocery store closing being a big deal applies to communities that have one or two grocery stores in a very in a very large radius. So if you have two grocery stores that are serving two decently sized population clusters and one of them closes, unless, of course, there's some mitigating circumstance where the owner died or the owner became disabled or whatever, chances are one of them closed because of a population change that's going on. Either the population decreased or its income decreased. Now, on the flip side of it, we can also use grocery stores to project population growth, specifically when chains come into play. One of the things I learned recently through this organization is, for better or for worse, however you want to think about this, when a large grocer like Aldi's or Walmart, or even going more the regional ones, when they set their sights on a city and they commit to building there, that means that they see something there. They see population growth. They see a need for it, whether it's immediate or it's down the road. So when you see somebody building a grocery store, somebody brand new coming in and building a second grocery store where you just don't have the ma and pa anymore, that's a good indication for that community. It might not be for that ma and pa shop, but it's going to be an indicator for you that, hey, this area is going somewhere. Because Winn-Dixie put it on their radar and said, yes, we need to have a grocery store here. Regardless of what it might do for their razor thin profit margins in the beginning and things like that. Because yes, even your big chain grocery stores, they run sort of razor thin profit margins as well. Maybe not to the same extent as a ma and pa, certainly, but the margin does not necessarily increase dramatically just because you're going over to a Pick and Save or a Walmart versus Smith's Town Market. So when you have a grocery store change, whether it be the only one or the only one of two that shuts down, or you have an additional one being built where there's only one or there's even two, again, it's a big commitment for somebody like Walmart or any sort of grocery provider to build a facility. Chances are they see into the future and they know what's coming, which means you probably want to be on that same train as well. All right, guys, that is what I have for you on this episode. So the 3 things you're going to be searching for in Google is you're going to be doing tax incentive funding, TIF, school referendums, and then 3 grocery stores. Again, just look at the news section for each one of these. See what some of the recent news articles have been. For all of these, you want to look at news articles as far back as 3 years because all of that's still going to be relative to your purposes. So even if the most recent article you see is from 2 years ago, as long as you go through and say, oh, okay, so they did break ground on that new school and it's halfway through building, or, it's listed on the school district's website as opening soon, September of 2027, whatever it may be, do a little bit of follow-up research and make sure things have started to still happen however you can. But those are 3 things that you should be Googling to give you an indication of where a specific population is headed. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I thought it was crazy when I had this epiphany. I was like, oh my gosh, that thing we were talking about last week, like with grocery stores, that totally can be part of my research for new markets. Another one of those little crazy things that can indicate where the projections are going for an area or a population cluster. I love it how things come together and you're like, oh my gosh, I can apply that to real estate. I can apply that to this, like completely randomly. It's one of those little things in life that brings a smile to my face. But anyway, guys, I hope you have a fantastic week and I will see you next time.